A routine patrol can shift into lethal violence in the span of a single heartbeat. On the night of April 10, 2004, San Francisco police officer Isaac Espinoza and his partner were working in plain clothes. They spotted a man acting suspiciously near Newhall Street and Newcomb Avenue, stepped out of their vehicle, and called out to him. The suspect abruptly turned and opened fire with an AK-47. Officer Espinoza was struck multiple times and killed instantly. The 29-year-old officer left behind a grieving wife and a 3-year-old daughter. For the department, it was the devastating loss of an 8-year veteran. When a life is taken so violently and without warning, it creates an emotional vacuum. A city mourns publicly, but the surviving family and the officers left behind are forced to navigate a chaotic, unresolved grief behind closed doors. To process that specific kind of trauma, the city of San Francisco commissioned a permanent installation in the foyer of its new police headquarters, the Spiral of Gratitude. Suspended beneath an oculus skylight, this massive glass cylinder is inscribed with a poem forged entirely from the words of those who know the cost of the badge, the relatives, partners, and co-workers of officers lost in the line of duty. The poem opens with a quiet invitation. Let us turn together in this circle of remembrance as the light shines through our words. By taking raw, fragmented grief and casting it into glass and light, the city created a physical anchor. It ensures the memories of the fallen endure, long after the initial shock of their loss fades. The memorial urges the living to draw on their courage, a directive that reaches deep into the department's history, tracing back to the morning of April 18, 1906. At 5:14 a.m., a massive earthquake fractured the city. Water mains rendering the fire department helpless and damaged jails forcing the release of inmates, San Francisco began to burn. Isolated fires merged, consuming 4.7 square miles of downtown. The response was brutal. On Mason Street, patrolman Max Fenner was crushed by a falling facade. Near 6th Street, Captain Gleason and Lieutenant Poulos were blown into the street by a premature demolition fuse. Surviving 3 days and nights amid the burning city required officers to improvise, seizing wagons and emptying nearly 400 grocery stores to prevent mass famine. That desperate, on-the-fly struggle laid the structural DNA for the department's modern crisis protocols. The inscribed poem commands its readers, "We must rise to protect," as they did. The timeline has moved forward, but the expectation has not. Today's officers rely on advanced communications and modern tactics, yet they still step into blind encounters, facing lethal threats that demand the exact same individual resolve required a century ago. In September 2017, Officer Reynaldo Serrano was investigating a suspicious person at the San Francisco International Airport. The suspect abruptly turned and attacked. Serrano survived the brutal stabbing, earning the Gold Medal of Valor and a Purple Heart. A year prior, officers Paul Dominguez, Nathan Chu, and James Trail held a tight perimeter in the Taraval district. When a suspect charged them from a backyard, actively firing a handgun, the officers held their ground and returned fire to stop the threat. The modern Medal of Valor represents institutional recognition that these officers tapped into a primal courage. They faced the same terrifying geometry of life and death as the officers who stood in the ashes of 1906. Institutional memory is fragile. Without deliberate preservation, the physical artifacts tying a city to its past protectors easily vanish into the background of urban development. In 1969, a brass plaque and a tree were dedicated outside St. Paul's High School to honor murdered officer Joseph Brodnick. Decades later, the school was sold and converted into condominiums. The plaque was nearly lost to a demolition crew. In the spring of 2024, a church staff member clearing out boxes in a rectory safe miraculously rediscovered it. 55 years after Officer Brodnick's death, the memorial was finally returned to his son, retired Sergeant Bob Brodnick. That near loss proves cultural memory requires active protection. A police department and its community must fiercely guard their artifacts to keep the soul of the institution intact. That active protection is the enduring purpose of the Spiral of Gratitude. It stands as a deliberate, permanent defense against forgetting. The final verses of the etched poem acknowledge the lingering ache of sacrifice. The time spent together was too short, and the missing long. They are the fallen, and we must not fall. For the families, partners, and coworkers left behind, the installation serves a highly practical function. It provides a designated physical sanctuary where they can safely reflect and process the heavy weight of their trauma. The San Francisco police uniform is an unbroken chain of risk and sacrifice. By transforming raw grief into lasting art, the city ensures the humanity and courage of the fallen will guide whoever puts on the badge tomorrow.